Whoa, this is a throwback right here. The iSideWith.com political quiz. I took this at least 20 different times back in 2015 when the 2016 race was going on. You had all these different candidates. You had like 20 Republican nominees, or 20 Republican candidates, rather. And you had like 6 or 7 Democrats and a whole bunch of independents and third parties. I was so engaged with the electoral process and politics in general that I decided to major in political science when I entered college the next year. I couldn't get enough of politics back in 2015 and 2016. I lived for it, but these days, not so much. As you could see with the very low activity on this YouTube channel. So, this is the 2024 quiz. They actually did update it to include the current election, and they added a whole bunch of questions. I think I saw the website got updated to include questions about the Israel-Palestine conflict, so it is current, and it has been updated, though it has like the same exact UI and interface as it did 10 years ago, which I find funny. So hopefully the website works properly and I don't screw something up and spend all this time taking the quiz. I think it'll take probably like 45 minutes to an hour. It's very extensive. So basically the way it works is, so you can see right here, the first question, for example, should there be term limits set for members of Congress? There's yes and no. That's your basic, if you don't feel like really going into it too much. But you can also specify why you say yes and why you say no. So this is going to be my first controversial take here. In a democracy, in a society where we have free elections, people should be free to choose who they want to vote for. And if people choose to vote for the same old geriatric fucks, then they have the right to do that. So I say, no. We already have term limits that are called elections. If people continue to re-elect these fucking senile buffoons, then that is on them and not on the old-ass motherfuckers that keep running and keep winning. So I think the responsibility should be bearing more on the voters than the actual candidates themselves, because they're the ones that are complacent. They're the ones that keep voting for these same people. So I don't see... Also, yeah, like, I just don't see term limits being an actual benefit, because some other corrupt motherfucker is just gonna come in. Like, in a place like, name any state, any blue state, or a red state, where there is no actual competition. The only competition lies in the primary, but rarely is an incumbent taken down by a primary. So, I don't think that term limits actually accomplish anything. Because if it is a solid red or solid blue state, let's say a politician is term limited, they're just going to be, someone else is going to step in, and nothing, in terms of like fundamentals, nothing is going to change. Like, really change in terms of policy and bills and laws and stuff like that. So I would say it doesn't really matter to me that much. If they said we enact term limits right now, I am not going to cry over it. I am not going to cry over Turtle Mitch McConnell losing his job because he's term limited. Like, I don't really care enough. But if you ask me, I say no. We already have term limits. So yeah, that's an example of how this quiz works. And based off of your answers to every single question, it matches that with their own records of the positions of each candidate running for office. And based off of that, it will tell you who your favorite candidate is and what percentage do you align with them. So let's say, for example, like, this could actually happen where you can align with Donald Trump on 42% of the issues and then also align with Joe Biden on like 40% of the issues, because 42 and 40%, that's like a wide range. Like, it's possible, especially with multiple different candidates that they'll include. Like, they'll include third-party candidates as well. And you can end up not really having a much better understanding of who you actually want to vote for. So, yeah, so let's move on. Should there be more restrictions on the current process of purchasing a gun? My answer is no, and the government should pass a national stand your ground law. That sounds amazing to me. I am a staunch supporter of the Second Amendment, which I'm not going to delve too much into because I made countless videos about that. Gun control and abortion are like the only two issues I discuss on my channel. Should teachers be allowed to carry guns? Let's see what the other stances are here. Yes, schools should require at least one teacher, security guard. Yeah, I think... here's the problem that I have is with the word allowed. I think teachers should be allowed to carry guns, but I also think it is better to have professionally trained security guards, like a retired cop or someone like that, and they're not necessarily patrolling the hallways and, you know, making sure that everyone's like, no, like that's still, you're going to be school security, which is unarmed, but have one armed guard standing there at the ready in case somebody gets there. I don't know if that's necessarily going to increase the risk of accidental shootings. I don't really buy that. I'm going to say this because, I mean, I know the word allowed. Like, I don't agree with the word allowed. But I think, honestly, this sounds better. Yes, because it more, like, agrees with the spirit of my belief in the Second Amendment is this instead of no. But to be fair, Democrats wouldn't agree with hiring security guards either. They just think people should be able to waltz in their gun-free zone. That's where most mass shootings happen. That's where most mass shootings happen, is in gun-free zones. Whether we're talking about a school or anywhere, that guns are not allowed. I did a whole fucking video essay on it that was like 2 hours long, and one of the segments was talking about how over 90%, I forget the exact number, it's 92 or 93% of all mass shootings occur in a place where guns are outlawed. So there's no such thing as a good guy with a gun, but not because the Second Amendment doesn't work, but because these are places where the Second Amendment is not allowed to be expressed. So there you go with that. Should victims of gun violence be allowed to sue firearms dealers and manufacturers? All I'm going to say is that we live in the age of suing. You can sue for literally anything and probably win. That being said, manufacturers and dealers should not be held for anything. No manufacturer and dealer should only be held liable for negligence. What does that even mean? No, I'm just going to say no, and that is very important to me. I don't believe in having witch hunts against the gun manufacturers, especially since the guns were legally obtained. Like, the thing is, like, a company like Smith & Wesson, they are operating completely within the legal process. So to say that they're responsible for these deaths when they were operating completely within the boundaries of the law, that even if you are a staunch gun control advocate, you cannot, like you're not following the law here. You hate, like, you're going completely against the legal process just to prove a point, like, and just to punish gun manufacturers and make them lose a lot of money and hopefully make them bankrupt. That's your primary objective here when you're talking about suing gun manufacturers. Do you support affirmative action programs? I'm just going to say I do not support it. I understand why people feel the need for it to be implemented. I don't think that someone who supports affirmative action is inherently racist, inherently hates white people. They genuinely believe that these minority groups have gotten such an unfair shake and need something to, quote-unquote, level out the playing field. But just because I can understand their position and understand kind of what their mental process is, I mean, I'll never fully understand, obviously, but I'm just going to say no. And I would say this is, like, one of the most important things, because I don't think that, you know, if we want to end racism and live in a society that treats people more equally, you can't fight discrimination with a different type of discrimination. So, no. So this is an interesting question. Packing the Supreme Court. Should the Supreme Court be... I love how they use the word reformed instead of what they're actually doing. It's packing the court and doing it in a way because you don't like the way that the Supreme Court is structured right now. You want to change it so that it can fit your own political narrative. Here's the thing. When you do this, there is a point of no return. So let's say Biden right now is somehow able to include more seats and term limits on judges, and he's able to, let's say, because we have a 6-3 conservative majority, he's able to install 4 more justices. That way there's a 7-6 liberal advantage in the court. Donald Trump gets back in, or whoever the next Republican president will be, is just going to do the exact same fucking thing that Biden just did, and it's going to be every 4 years is going to be the Supreme Court basically being on the ballot. And I guess some people are okay with that, but I think it's a slippery slope, and it's going to, I think it's absolutely going to upset the balance of power, because the Supreme Court, that branch will be completely within, it'll be basically a subsidiary of the executive branch rather than being its own branch separately. And I understand the president appoints the Supreme Court justice, but because they have life terms, you can change the makeup of the court for a very long time, and having it changed every 4 years or 8 years, I don't think benefits anybody. So yes, I don't believe in fucking with the Constitution. Should it be illegal to burn the American flag? No, it's just a piece of cloth. I wouldn't say it's just a piece of cloth, but I would say yes, it absolutely is a violation of free speech. And yes, I think that people who burn flags should not be jailed or arrested or anything happen to them, because it's free expression. Whether you like it or not, you can say what you want about it, but it goes against the spirit of the First Amendment. Decriminalizing drug use. I'm going to say yes, because I don't like the no's, the no options. It says decriminalize drugs that offer medical benefits. I don't care. I don't care medical benefits or not. Increase funding for addiction prevention. Why not both? Literally, there's a country called Portugal that does both, and it works pretty well. It's been slipping lately. There's been more drug use that's been happening in recent years because of its complete decriminalization of all drug use. But on the other hand, they're still doing a lot better there in terms of drugs than we're doing here, because you still have people overdosing on the streets, and you still have people dying of drugs while you put people in jail for using drugs. You know what I mean? So I would say this is one of my most important things as well. I don't think that the war on drugs has been an unmitigated failure, completely, full stop. So, yeah, any policies that continue that, I am just completely against. People on the no-fly list be banned from purchasing guns. No, it's unconstitutional to deny someone's right without due process. Simple as that. I also think it's a slippery slope. I think both of these are pretty accurate, but I'll just go with that. Do you support the Patriot Act? No, and you should pass strict laws prohibiting government surveillance without probable cause and a warrant. Fuck the Patriot Act. Fuck George W. Bush. Enough said there. Should the redrawing of congressional districts be controlled by an independent, nonpartisan commission? Let me see what these no options there. No, there's no better alternative. I'm sure there's a better alternative. Gerrymandering fucking sucks. But I want to see what the mindset is in support of gerrymandering. It allows officials to more effectively represent the interests of their constituency. That was definitely paid for by some lobbyist. There's no way an actual human being believes that sentence right there. Yeah, I think I'm just going to go with this one. Gerrymandering gives an unfair advantage to the party in power during redistricting. I am a little unsure, though, about how do we get to having a nonpartisan. I mean, I know there's states like Iowa that do it pretty well, but I feel like you can say that it's an independent commission, and you can still find a way to sort of fuck with things a little bit. So I don't know if it's actually going to be 100% better. But yeah, I think ending gerrymandering is certainly something that should happen. It would be great for everybody. Should the U.S. government grant immunity to Edward Snowden? Why'd I say more? It's most. Yes. He should be protected under the Whistleblower Protection Act. Absolutely. Edward Snowden is a hero. Should the government be allowed to seize private property with reasonable conversation? So this is eminent domain question. My family has actually personally been a victim of eminent domain way before my time. We're talking about the 1970s, but still, it's crazy that they're just allowed to do that. So, oh yeah, no, extreme cases of national emergency. What's national emergency? Is it like building an army base? Is it like what is a national emergency that you need to do that? Public projects. I never heard. The thing, these public projects are always just like ways to benefit the corporation. It's like, oh yeah, we're gonna build a fucking Walmart or some fucking bullshit that just benefits the corporation and doesn't do anything for the actual individual. So, eminent domain, again, oil pipeline. Unless it's for an oil. Fuck no, fuck that. Should not be allowed to seize. Never be allowed to seize private property. I think that's a little bit, because I'm sure you could think of a case where the government should seize private property. So I don't like the word never, but I also certainly don't like unless it's for an oil pipeline. Fuck that. So I'm just going to say straight up no, and it is a more important issue, though I do recognize that there is a little bit of nuance in this debate, and you could think of a couple of instances where eminent domain should be, at least like, there should be a legal framework that allows it to take place, but it certainly should be reserved for the most extreme cases. So I guess this is more of my choice then. Yes, but only in extreme cases, right? Yeah. Should members of Congress be allowed to trade stocks while serving in office? Yes, but with strict protections against insider trading, as long as their trades are publicly reported in real time. I mean, yeah, that's been going on with Nancy Pelosi. And people have actually been doing a thing where they follow Nancy Pelosi's investing, and they end up fucking rich. So, for that reason alone, fuck yeah. Although, to be fair, I don't really give a fuck, because I don't think it really changes anything. I mean, insider trading, that's something that theoretically should already be illegal, right? People are always going to find a way to get around it, but banning people just because they're in Congress from investing, I feel like that's just like a blanket policy that doesn't really do anything. Like, when it comes to corruption in politics, trading stocks isn't even close to being at the top of the list. So, should the Supreme Court justices be prohibited from making financial transactions with people who have a vested interest in court outcomes? This is vague. I don't like vague, because it could you could think of like any remote connection that a Supreme Court justice may have, and you're gonna try to like fucking impeach them and remove them from court. I could feel like they can do that or try to do that. So, what is a financial transaction? Right? Like, if someone like owns like a fucking cupcake shop and they want their taxes lowered, but the Supreme Court justice frequents that bakery and buys the fucking cupcakes, does that mean that they are corrupt because the bakery owner wants the taxes to be lowered and the Supreme Court justices happens to like make a ruling based off of that? So I think the answer is no, just because I don't like the vagueness of that. And I'm going to say it's a little bit of a less important thing, although I do kind of respect the spirit of the question in making sure that there is less corruption, but I feel like it'll result in more corruption. You'll have people being removed from office for no actual reason, or removed from the bench, whatever you want to call it. Should the government regulate social media sites as a means to prevent fake news and misinformation? Another thing that sounds great on paper, but who determines what is fake news and misinformation? For example, you, as a liberal Democrat, progressive, you like the idea of government cracking down on fake news and quote-unquote misinformation, because the person in charge right now is someone that you trust to correctly determine, like to agree with you what constitutes fake news and what constitutes misinformation. But give that same power to Donald Trump, he will regulate MSNBC, he will regulate CNN, he will regulate all these independent left-wing outlets, and you're not going to like that policy very much when that happens, right? I don't think that, well, I don't know if I necessarily agree that social media companies should not be regulated at all. I think the regulation should be that they should allow more free speech. That's what I think. So I don't agree with so I'm not really a libertarian when it comes to this, because I do think that regulation may be a good thing, but as far as cracking down on free speech and that kind of shit, I certainly do not agree. So I agree, this is most important, absolutely. Government should not determine what is fake or real news. Should social media companies ban political advertising? I don't think so. I mean, just because... I mean, I think your average person is not very well informed, and I think the fact that they're looking to Facebook to make up their mind on who to vote for is pretty fucking sad. But I think political advertising, I'm not a huge fan of it, but at the end of the day, it's something that completely banning may actually be more of a harm than a good to society, because people are going to be just completely disengaged from the political process if you don't have political advertising, because social media is the only place that people go. You can ban it for social media so they can do what? Do it on TV? Even with TV, people do streaming, right? Radio? Like, come on. So I don't agree with that, with banning social media advertising for political ads. Should the military upgrade Air Force One? So this is an outdated question, because this is when Donald Trump was getting his shit upgraded. So if I say yes, I'm automatically going to be on the side of Trump and be against Biden just because of a stupid fucking Air Force One question. I think the question is no longer relevant and should be removed. That'll be my stance. Although if you want my real stance, I think military spending has gone way out of control. So my answer would probably be no. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't, I don't really fucking care about Air Force One. Of all the issues, Air Force One is not, no, it's just not there. But you know what, actually, I'll just say no, because that's what I think. Just a blanket, no. Should the government stop construction of the Dakota? That's another thing. Didn't the Dakota Access Pipeline fucking already, get... Is it still a thing? I need to look this up. Dakota Access Pipeline, because I have no fucking idea. The decision is not final, so it's okay. It's still an ongoing thing. I thought this is people were talking about this way back in fucking 2015, so that's why I was kind of confused. Should the government stop construction? Yeah, I mean, the fact that I don't really support eminent domain, it would be pretty hypocritical for me to be no, you should do it for the oil. Do it for the oil. No, I don't necessarily agree with that. Stop construction, though. Did they already seize the land, though? Is it already done? I don't think that really actually matters, but... Drastically increase the amount of fines the company must pay in the event of an accident. I mean, that sounds great, but these increasing the amount of fines is a drop in the bucket to these big oil companies. I'm not necessarily a fucking green person. I don't agree with banning oil and all that kind of shit. But if it's seizing land from people, I just can't get with that. I don't like that. I don't. But I'm only going to say somewhat because I don't know the full extent. I'm going to be honest, I'm not completely 100% informed when it comes to the specific issue of the Dakota Access Pipeline, because I read about it years ago, but I have no idea what's going on with it now. Oh, and here we go about climate change. Should the government increase environmental regulations to prevent climate change? Keyword prevent. You're not going to. At this point, you're not going to. You can pass the most fucking green... AOC can write whatever the fuck policy she wants, and everybody can be on board with it, and it's still not going to make a fucking difference. The fact that we had less carbon emissions under Donald Trump, than we did, than all of Europe did, and Europe has a lot more green-friendly environmental policies than the United States did, especially under Trump. I think that says a lot, that these policies are quite arbitrary and don't actually do anything meaningful. As much as I accept the findings, from the scientists that global warming is happening, I don't necessarily think it's a natural occurrence, but I just feel like I'm going to be a realist here and say that all these policies and regulations, they're just going to make lives harder, make people's lives harder, and not actually do anything to prevent something that seems like we're already at the point of no return. So why bother making people's lives miserable to try to stop something that is already happening and can't be stopped? I think, green energy, if it is the better technology and it is more efficient, like all these green activists say it is, then let the market decide for itself. Let people, if the electric cars are so much better, let people choose to drive electric cars and not force them to. So that's why I don't like government regulations banning gas-powered cars, banning this, banning that. It doesn't necessarily do anything to actually address the real problem here. And I don't agree with taxing carbon emissions either. It's fucking absurd. So I'm just going to say no. Government should, and I think it is a more important issue because it talks about government regulation and implementing policies that don't actually improve people's lives. It actually hurts people. Should the U.S. withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement? Well, I guess now we're back in, right? If Trump gets in, we're going to be back out. And that's the other thing when it talks about climate change. We could pass the most stringent climate change regulation. It doesn't stop, like, almost every other country in the fucking world from burning fossil fuels and doing this and doing that. And that's where most of this pollution comes from. So even if the United States, like, it would only make a certain dent, even if it could prevent global warming. Like, you need every single fucking country on board, which I guess the Paris Climate Agreement is supposed to do, although I'm pretty sure it's a non-binding agreement and it's pretty vague as far as, like, what you actually need to do. I think, until other countries are held to the same standard, that's something that I certainly agree with, but I don't think us being in or being out of the Paris Climate Agreement really fundamentally changes anything for anybody. Disposable products, plastic cups, plates, and cutlery that contains less than 50% of biodegradable material be banned. No. I think increasing consumer incentives sounds like a decent solution here, although it's, you're never going to fully solve it, but I don't think you're going to fully solve it either by banning shit. Like, they banned plastic bags in New York, and it's been a fucking nightmare, and I hate it. It makes my life more complicated, and I don't like that. I'm just being honest. I'm a voter, and I'm someone who, I'm gonna be real, even if it doesn't make me look good or sound good. That's just, how it is. You do stuff that makes it hard. Plastic cups are very convenient. Paper plates are very convenient, I don't want that to just get rid of that. No, fuck that. Fuck that. Yeah, fuck yeah. More important. You don't take away my fucking red Solo cup. You gotta respect the memory of Toby Keith. You can't do that. Should the government give tax credits and subsidies to the wind power industry? So here is the funny fucking thing. And I always, troll the environmentalists with this specific topic. You guys love wind power so much, but you say that you need to ban the plastic from the ocean because the fish choke on it, the seagulls, when they're, doing their thing, they choke on it and die. All these poor little animals, they die because they choke on plastic. Yet you're fine with these fucking wind turbines being everywhere. They don't just choke. They don't choke. It's a worse, more brutal death for these birds that run into the windmills. They get decapitated. Their fucking body parts getting all over the place. You can't say that you want to ban plastic for the animals, right? And then support wind power that kills so many birds. And, you can look statistically, it's only killed X amount of birds, but that's because we don't really have a widespread wind power industry quite yet. So if it does become the mainstream like you guys want it to be, so many birds are going to die. So many fucking birds. So if you're an actual animal rights advocate, you should want every wind turbine to be taken down. That's what you should be. But I think it's simply the fact that wind power is inferior, and from what I've seen, it's been proven to be inferior to oil, coal, and nuclear. So that would be, yes, it's a waste of resources to put into something that doesn't actually fucking work, and it's not as efficient as other energy sources. Should drilling be allowed in the Alaska Wildlife Refuge? So not until we have depleted all other oil reserves. That sounds like something that's great on paper, but practically probably wouldn't work that well. Increase alternative energy subsidies to eliminate our dependence on another thing that sounds great on paper, but will it actually work? Probably not. With very strict environmental regulations. I mean, that's something that sounds good. I mean, yeah, I think very strict. If we're talking about a wildlife refuge, yes, there should be strict regulations. I'm not necessarily against all environmental regulations. I also don't think that they should just fucking drill the entire fucking wildlife reserve. That's fucked up. But, you know, they can maybe take a little bit of that and use it. These are our natural resources, but instead we're importing oil from a lot of these countries instead of exporting. So, you know, even though we have one of the largest oil supplies in the world, that doesn't really add up to me. Do I support fracking? Yeah, not in heavily populated areas. I certainly agree with that because it has been proven to fuck up a lot of people in their health. I think increasing oversight, those two things kind of go hand in hand. So I'm going to say yes. Should the U.S. expand offshore oil drilling? Yeah, I think as far as deregulating the energy sector, I completely agree with that. Because, like I said, if it really was a better technology, then it should speak for itself. Because that's what always happens. The better technology overtakes the obsolete technology when it comes to any industry, anything that we're talking about. So, yeah. Should researchers be allowed to use animals in testing for the safety of drugs, vaccines, medical devices, and cosmetics? Yes, but not for cosmetics. Sounds like a good thing, as much as I hate. It also depends on what animals we're talking about. If we're talking about fucking dogs, not a fan. If we're talking about mice, it's a little bit of a different story, because I'm going to tell you guys this. If there's a mouse in my house, I'm not fucking putting in like one of those glue traps that traps them in and then you let them go. No, I'm using the ones that kill them, because they're invading my home and they're fucking disgusting little fucking creatures that spread disease and all this shit. So yeah, I'm not no, I'm sorry. But yeah, I don't think cosmetics should be a fucking, you should torture animals for cosmetics. Give me a fucking break. I would say that is a more important thing, because, you know, I do think there should be some animal right protections. Should the government build a network of electric vehicles? Only if they use renewable energy sources. I actually would agree with that, because I've seen diesel-powered fucking Tesla stations. Like, are you fucking kidding me? That is ridiculous. So I am skeptical of the viability of electric vehicles, absolutely. Focusing on improving public transportation? No, I don't. Subsidies to private companies that compete? Well, the problem with that is you're providing subsidies and you're bailing out a lot of these electric car companies that are not making any money, and they're deep in the red, and they're actually not contributing to the market at all. But Biden and his gang are propping them up. So I would just say this is the thing that aligns with me the most. But if they build a network of electric charging stations, that alone doesn't upset me as much as them banning gas-powered cars and forcing electric cars onto you. But if they provide it as an option, I mean, it would take a lot of taxpayer money out, and that's something I don't really like. So that's why I'm saying no. But, yeah, it's not really something that I am as passionate about as other environmental questions. Should cities be allowed to offer private companies economic incentives to relocate? Yeah. As long as the local environment's not compromised, what does that even mean? As long as the tax revenue will eventually exceed the tax incentives? No, I think they should be allowed to. Cities and governments should be able to do whatever they can as a local entity to attract business. And I don't think, as far as be allowed, the federal government says that these cities can't provide good incentives. That doesn't, like, who the hell in their right mind would be like, yeah, I agree with that. Lowering corporate taxes. See, I don't really support raising corporate taxes, but lowering corporate taxes, that they're just gonna take that money that they're saving and pocket it for themselves. So I don't necessarily think that the corporate tax rate is like lowering it. Like, the trickle down shit doesn't work that well either. So I don't really know where I stand on that then. Well, the answer is yes as far as that's concerned. I'm just gonna say yes because these other, if the company promises to, local residents, but again, I think the local entity should be able to do whatever the fuck they want at the end of the day. So, subsidies to taxpayers who purchase an electric vehicle. Fuck no. Should cities open drug safe havens where people who are addicted to illegal drugs can use them under the supervision of medical professionals? So based off of the questions I've answered so far, anyone who's been watching this long will assume that my answer to this would be a resounding no. That's, of course, we shouldn't have taxpayer money fucking supporting. Actually, I think that this is good. I think this is a policy that's been proven to work. It doesn't necessarily encourage people to get high. People who weren't high already, like people who have never taken drugs, people who have never been addicted before, aren't like, well, now we have these clinics where I can legally get high, so I'm going to do it. That doesn't happen. It's mostly people who already are suffering from a problem, and they go to this place instead of going to some fucking crack den. I think, yeah, it is a beneficial thing for society. And I think it will absolutely, it's been proven to reduce the drug overdose rate. So yeah, fuck yeah. It's actually, like, anything, I think it's a very important thing. And, like, this kind of goes back to the whole war on drugs thing. It's a failed policy. Ended already. It's been, it's been far overdue. Should the federal government increase funding of healthcare for low-income individuals? Our healthcare system is a fucking joke. It's an absolute fucking joke. I do want a single-payer healthcare system. Abso-fucking-lutely, because the way that our system... And I'm not trying to say that... So, I also don't really necessarily agree with socialized medicine. That's when the government runs the hospitals. I think it's good, though, when the government controls insurance rather than the hospitals. So they pay the hospitals with taxpayer money, of course, but they don't control the hospitals and run them, because the NHS, not that big of a fan of. And there's definitely, the grass isn't as green on the other side as people make it out to be when it comes to these other healthcare systems, but ours is just a fucking joke. One medical debt and you're completely bankrupt, your entire life is ruined. That alone makes the other systems better by default. And again, you look at other rates, like you look at the average lifespan, you look at like all the metrics that determine health. It's not like the countries that have universal healthcare have a lower quality of life than we do. We actually have a lower quality of life than they do. I think that speaks volumes about the American healthcare system. Should the government require employees of large businesses to be vaccinated from COVID? So here's story time. I was about to lose my job because of the vaccine mandate that was going to happen. But because the Supreme Court overturned it, I am not an unemployed bum right now. Thankfully, the Supreme Court did its job. It is an awful thing. That was, like, honestly something that contributed so negatively to my mental health, was the thought of being treated like a second-class citizen because of my choice to not take an experimental drug. I think it's great that it got overturned. Businesses should not, no. Government require no, and businesses should not require no. Just, like, completely. But it's kind of like an outdated thing. Because I feel like at this point, I haven't heard of any jobs. Like, in, like, 2021, the middle of 2021, even like early 2022, I would see so many jobs that say COVID vaccine required. I don't really see that anymore. So it's kind of less of a thing. I think even hospitals now had to rehire nurses that got fired because of it. So it's kind of a less important thing, but it is still very important to me because the fact that Biden was on board with it, that alone takes a lot of points off of him for me. And I think that alone, I think I can never vote for him because he's a fucking tyrant. Like, he's been proven to be a tyrant. So when you say that Trump is an authoritarian, nothing Trump has ever done has been anything close to as much of an egregious human right violation as what Biden tried to do with the fucking vaccine mandate, okay? Do I support Obamacare? I don't support it. Not because government should not be involved in healthcare, and not because markets should be open to compete across state lines. That has its own issues. Like, it's not like, oh my god, such a great thing when you have free market with healthcare. I support my reason for no is not because of the entire layout of Obamacare. Although, I mean, that is kind of more of a problem that I have because it raises the premium for everybody else that does not qualify for Obamacare. And then, yes, it improves the lives of people who, kind of are in between Medicaid and being able to actually afford insurance. But it's kind of been a neutral policy. It's benefited a lot. It's hurt other people. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is the individual mandate. The government forcing you to buy insurance is the most fucking, people talk about how great Obama is. That's like a right-wing fucking wet dream, in my opinion. Like, that's what it sounds like to me. Like, a greedy capitalist pig would love a policy like that the government doesn't force something like to improve people's lives. They force people to pay a private entity money. Like, it's completely absurd. So I'm just gonna say no, and I'm gonna have it as like a more, because I do appreciate some parts of it. That's why I'm not going like all in on that. But I definitely am opposed to Obamacare, and I don't think it does. Single payer. Absolutely single payer. This system guarantees healthcare for everyone. No one gets turned down because they don't have enough money. And, if you do, like, you don't go fucking bankrupt. Like, it's way better than what we have right now. That was actually my senior thesis was on the issue of healthcare. And it was pretty much me coming to that conclusion after doing research. Because I actually came in being like, I don't know. Like, I'm not sure what to think. And then I ended up being like, holy shit, we need single-payer healthcare. Should people be required to work in order to receive Medicaid? It's hard to apply for a job if you're sick. Define sick, though. Is sick someone who is completely disabled? Because that would be more of like a separate issue. But if you're mentally sick or something, you know what I mean? Sick is a blanket thing, and is a broad thing that I don't. Yeah, no. The vast majority of people who receive Medicaid are disabled. Is that necessarily true, though? I don't know. That's not like a rebuttal. That's like a genuine question. Are the vast majority of people who receive Medicaid, because I've known plenty of people who, most of the people I've known on Medicaid, they ain't no disabled. They're falling on hard times, though, and they need the help. And what is a work requirement? If you're like an independent contractor or whatever, because you don't have like a regular job. But I do kind of agree with the premise that people shouldn't just collect welfare, and contribute nothing back. Should the government fund the World Health Organization? I say, fuck the WHO. Seriously. They don't really do anything good. It's been shown to be ineffective. They're corrupt. They don't have the best interests of people in mind. So, yeah, no, defund the WHO for sure. I have to take a shit, so I'm taking a break. Ugh, that Stouffer's mac and cheese went right through me. I'm sorry. Ooh. Yeah, that was rough. Should the government regulate the prices of life-saving drugs? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, they should. Limit the investment in research. Sure, sure. Should there be more or less privatization of veterans' benefits? Um, that's honestly, I don't know. That's a tough one right there. Uh, the VA is, well, is not very good. Um, it really isn't. I'm just gonna say probably less because if I believe in the VA is not a good system, but doesn't mean that you need to that more privatization is the solution. Definitely not. Federal government negotiate drug prices? Fuck yeah, absolutely. Legalization of marijuana? Well, yeah, the answer is yes, a resounding yes, but I'm just looking at these only for medical use. No. Yeah, I like that. Release anyone serving time solely for drug offenses. So if they're like a marijuana dealer, I don't even know. I think most of them have been released at this point, right? If I'm not mistaken. Penalize doctors who give health advice that contradicts contemporary scientific consensus. Oh, so this is like, because there are a lot of quack doctors out there that give bullshit treatments, right? So we don't want that to happen, but we also, eh, misinformation. But was that talking about the vaccine? Because that is, a different story. But if they tell you to fucking put leeches into your to cleanse you out, then yeah, I think it's again, it's one of those broad questions that on paper seems great and probably is like a good thing to do for the most part. So I'm just gonna say yes, but put less emphasis on that one because I'm not entirely sure based on the framing of the question. Deny coverage to individuals who have a pre-existing condition. Fuck no. That is disgusting. Increase funding for mental health research? Yes, absolutely. Only increase funding for personalized care instead of subsidizing pharmaceutical companies. Medication works, so that's the thing. It definitely works, but I'm just gonna say this overall, and I think that is a very important because mental health care is like the one thing that we still have a long way to go. So here's the thing: I'm against the COVID thing, but the other vaccines that have been on the market for decades and have been proven for decades that they work, to me, is a completely different conversation than the experimental drug that we got in 2021. Only for deadly contagious diseases, with exceptions for those religious. Fuck that. Regardless, this is state level. Give me a break. Require vaccination to attend public school. I'm just going to say yes, just overall, and I think that is a more important thing. I understand, you know, but it's something that I just can't. Just because the COVID shot turned out to be what it was doesn't mean that I'm automatically against all the other vaccines. So, do I support the use of nuclear energy? Yeah, because it is actually like a really good form of energy. People just hear the word nuclear and they're like, "Oh my god." But as far as like an actual nuclear power plant, I think the only time I can really think of that happening was in Japan. But overall, they're actually pretty safe, relatively speaking, of course. And nuclear energy is like literally the most efficient form of energy that you could possibly have. Consumers have the right to know what's in their food. I think, yeah, banning GMOs is stupid because you're gonna be banning like most food out there. I trust the science of responsible food engineering, but I don't trust the motives of the food companies selling them. I think that's honestly more of what my stance is. Not necessarily that I'm like some fucking lunatic that's like, oh my god, GMOs, it's killing everybody. But I think, yeah, I mean, you should have the right to know everything that's in your food. It's kind of like the nutrition facts. That's a government regulation. That's not something they decide to do. So, yeah, you should know everything that's in there. But I guess, just the fact that it says GMO, I understand the other counterpoint to that. It says GMO, oh my god, genetically modified. But again, that's the consumer should have all the information that they feel that they need to have. And there's a sizable number of people that want that information. So I don't see anything wrong, like, fundamentally with having that available. But I admit it's like at the bottom of my list of issues. Should the government fund? Yes, the government should fund space travel because there's definitely some shit out there. There's life, and there's so many things that's there that we don't even we haven't even scratched the surface. So I think, yeah, increasing our budget, drastically increase NASA's budget, is actually something that I support. I love the idea of that, but I admit it's less important to me than other stuff. Though it is like somewhat important issue actually. Should Biden be impeached on allegations of abuse of power, obstruction, and corruption? I do not think that impeachment is something that actually accomplishes anything aside from rallying people on the opposing side because they feel like it's a witch hunt or whatever. And they did the same thing with Trump, absolutely. But just because they did it with Trump, it's pretty much a tit for tat thing. If Trump was never impeached twice, ridiculous, because the second impeachment, he wasn't even in fucking office anymore. That's how unhinged these anti-Trump lunatics really are. And they're so confident that he's a loser and he can't win the election, but they're trying so hard in the courts to take him off the ballot, to do all these different things, to convict him of all these different crimes. If he wasn't such a threat, then why would you need to do all these things, right? But my whole thing with that is two wrongs don't make a right. You're going down this path now that was started by the Democrats. That is admittedly true. But the Republicans going ahead and just impeaching Biden is only going to not only stoke more division, but it's also and also make the whole impeachment process completely meaningless, although it already is completely meaningless, to be fair. But it's going to be just like it's going to have no chance of gaining its legitimacy back, the impeachment process, if we just impeach every single president. So I actually do think this is a very important issue. No impeachment of President Biden. Illegal immigrants have access to government subsidized healthcare. I do believe in government subsidized healthcare. But not for everybody. Not for people who come in and don't actually do, they're coming into the country illegally. And while I do have sympathy for these people, we need to prioritize the people who actually live in this country, pay taxes in this country, and are fully functioning members of society that fully contribute to society. So I think that should be the main priority. Hey, if you want to have the benefits of being a citizen of the United States, should be a citizen of the United States. Although I understand the plight, make that treacherous journey across the entire world, but come on. There's no way the system can handle having all these people coming in and taking care of all of them. You can't. You can't do it. Be deported after treatment. Yeah, okay. Yes, and grant them citizenship. Again, that's something that I'd like. It sounds great, but is it actually going to work practically? If we just give citizenship to everybody that wants to come here, we're going to be completely overwhelmed. We're already overwhelmed. So, my answer is no. I mean, sure they should be allowed to, I guess, to purchase private health care. I'm not necessarily for deportation, but as far as taking resources away from our own people to other people, it's just not practical. So I'm going to say, yeah, no, do not give government subsidized healthcare to illegal immigrants. Sorry. Build a wall. Yes, and Mexico would pay for it. No. Make it a high-tech surveillance barrier instead of a physical one. It's funny how people talk about costly and ineffective. They don't care if it's like a fucking $50 gazillion infrastructure bill that you don't even know most of the stuff that's even fucking in it. You won't bat an eye when the government passes these really expensive bills. But a border wall, oh, we can't have that. It's because most of the people who say that, they say it's too expensive because they want to give like a monetary, they want to give like some kind of fiscal, kind of sensible reason as to why they're opposed to the wall, but the real reason why they're opposed to the wall is because they want more people to come into the country. And because it's a Trump proposed thing, so anything proposed by Trump automatically needs to be opposed by default. Like, none of these people will ever say that anything Trump has ever done is okay. Like, it is okay. Everything is automatically bad. Because that's how these unhinged individuals, the Trump derangement syndrome is so strong. It gets worse and worse as the years go on. And even if he doesn't win re-election, people are still going to be talking about him and just continue to be obsessed over him. And never admit that he's ever done any good for this country, and he certainly has. So, yeah, we should adopt hey, at least that's an honest answer. That's the honest answer that anyone who's opposed to the wall would actually have. No, we should adopt an open border policy. So, yeah, absolutely I support a wall. Although I don't think it's going to solve the underlying immigration problem, which maybe will come up in later questions. But yeah, I do genuinely support a wall, and I think it'll do something. You know, it'll definitely help mitigate it. Because these people come in, you see these videos, and they're just coming in through open fucking territory. They're just coming right in. So yeah, maybe not making it so easy and not just welcoming them through. Because, and then the crazy thing is you have these armed Border Patrol agents that just, boop, let them in. The catch and release needs to end. I'm sorry, it just does. Should undocumented immigrants be offered in-state tuition rates at public colleges within their residing state? No, again, that's a citizen benefit, and they shouldn't have that benefit. Absolutely not. Absolutely fucking not. Like, I have nothing but sympathy for these people, but you also have to look out for the interest of the United States and the citizens of the United States, and that's not in our interest. It's just not. If we can barely take care of our own people, adding all these other people on top of it is just not practical. I'm sorry, it's just not. Children of illegal immigrants if they were born here, look, Constitution says it, and I don't necessarily agree with repealing the fucking the civil the post-Civil War amendments. Like, I'm just not for that. Birthright citizenship is a controversial thing, but the fact of the matter is it's been an institution for over 150 years, and it's been ingrained in the Constitution for that long. So I don't think ripping it up and changing it, first of all, you can't really do, like, it's kind of a moot point, and that's why I'm kind of put it like at the bottom, because you would have to completely change the Constitution. You would have to have in order to do that, you're going to have to make a new amendment that would pretty much overturn that amendment, or that aspect of the amendment, which is, you know, they last did that with Prohibition. You need 2/3 of Congress to get it through, and then you also need 3/4 of state legislatures. That's not going to happen. All the blue states are going to turn that down, getting rid of birthright citizenship. So it's not really an important question, like, really electorally. That's why I have it at the bottom, because it's not really going to, yes or no is not going to, it's not going to happen, you know? Working illegal immigrants be given temporary amnesty. Yes, but only if they pay taxes, create a simple path to citizenship with no criminal record. Again, these all sound like great things, but I don't... I'm not with amnesty. I'm sorry, I'm just not. Allow them to stay? So I'm going to have an honest thing. This has been a conflicting issue for me, because I have known many people throughout my life that are illegal, undocumented, whatever you want to call them, but they're human beings. And a lot of them have lived here. They don't know their home country. The only home country they know is the United States. So the whole DACA thing, I definitely support. the working illegal immigrants, I mean, the problem with that is they only the most all the working illegal immigrants, they take less, they take these jobs for less money, right? And you would think for like people who are so called for workers' rights, they wouldn't like to have a system where they employ these undocumented people, pay them like half of what they pay a citizen, because it's under the books and you're not even supposed to hire these people in the first place. You think that they'd be against something like that. And I guess they technically are, because they want to give them all citizenship, but the only reason why they have jobs in the first place is because they're willing to take it for less money. If they become citizens, is their market value going to be the same? Most likely not. So, look, again, I have nothing but sympathy for these people, but they should not be given amnesty. I'm sorry, they should not. Again, something like DACA is a different story, but it's just like, it's ridiculous at this point. You can't just keep letting these people in and letting them, pretty much have all the benefits of being a citizen without actually being a citizen. They're not, they say, illegal immigrants, they pay taxes all the time. Not if you have an untaxed fucking job that you're not even legally supposed to have. A visa's a different thing because it's legal. That's a legal process. But we're talking about undocumented people. They are certainly not paying taxes. I don't like that. The people keep pushing that narrative. It is definitely not true. Increase or decrease the amount of temporary work visas. High skilled. So that's the key. High skilled. So that's like, that would be someone like a chemist or someone like that's really in a field that we can use more people in that. Hiring, I don't know. Hiring the high. See. That's what this is all about. So that's why you have a lot of right wing. You have a lot of capitalists that support illegal immigration. That's their motive right there. The businesses hiring the highest skilled workers at the lowest cost. That's what it's all about. It's about saving money. It's not about humanitarianism. It's not about anything like that. Money is the motivation here. So, yeah, I think it's just better off if we focus on our own people and not, really spending a lot of resources on getting other people to come in. I think that's a very important thing. Oh my God. This is actually a question. Should they be deported if they commit a serious crime? No. Who the fuck says that? No. I need to see this. I need to see, like, what the poll... There's 257,000 people who say no, they shouldn't be deported if they commit... I guess it's probably people who don't... What is a serious crime? Obviously, I guess jaywalking is probably not a serious crime, but smoking a joint, is that a serious crime? So I guess in that way I understand the problem that people may have with that question. Should they be deported if they commit a serious crime? Yes, but after they finish serving their sentence, yeah. I think that sounds good to me. As long as it's safe for them to return there. Yeah, I'm going to murder like a whole bunch of women, young women, but, we're not going to deport you until it's safe for you, because we care about your interests. You're a fucking serial killer, serial rapist, but we have your best interests. Like, we're going to bend over backwards for you. That's really like what... that's what that answer says, and it's ridiculous. Should sanctuary cities receive federal funding? We should ban the use of sanctuary cities. Again, I want to see kind of where people stand on this. So it's right down the middle. So my issue with that is that we have a lot of sanctuary cities, whether you like it or not. They ain't backing down because the federal funding is going away. So in practicality, what are you going to accomplish? You're going to make a principled stance against sanctuary cities, but there's going to be a lot of citizens, legal citizens, that are going to be suffering greatly because of the lack of federal funding in places like New York City and other such places. So I actually don't. I think they absolutely should receive federal funding. Although I understand, I kind of respect the... trying to do something to mitigate this problem, because sanctuary cities are definitely not a great thing, but I don't think completely defunding them is a great thing either. Required to... Oh, yes, absolutely. And that's the thing. If I moved to another country, I would not feel comfortable living there and not knowing the language. So Removing multilingual translations. I don't know about that one. Because there are ways, like, there are instances where that can actually be a useful thing. Like, I knew a lot of people who had Chinese parents. They were citizens. You know what I mean? And, like, just expecting them to know English and know the whole language overnight is not very fair. Remove no. I just think, yeah, it should be, like, a basic requirement. We should have an official language, because if we can't communicate with one another, we're not a united country. I know the U.S. doesn't have an official language, but it really should. So, that's my answer to that. Local law enforcement be allowed to detain illegal immigrants for minor crimes and transfer them to federal immigrant. No, I think if they're commit a federal crime, maybe. But again, if they're like smoking a joint or a fucking traffic stop or some bullshit like that, that is just no. That's kind of just like, I mean, I guess it's a tool to increase deportations. So I guess in that way, all illegal immigrants should be turned over to federal authorities and deported. I mean, in an ideal world. But coming, you know, knocking on people's doors and checking if they're an illegal immigrant is like a bit too much for me. So that's actually something that I'm actually going to say no on. Because I feel like it's just a way for the police to pretty much abuse their power and not actually do what they're meant to do. They should focus more of their time on helping people. And yeah, I mean, they're violent people who are legal immigrants, of course. And that's why, you know, if it's violent, but don't just go after people if they're not doing, just go out of your way to go after these people. Like, it's the reason why you have so many people is because the failed policies at the border. When you address those, and also the war on drugs, if you address that as well, then the thing is, like, it's violence from the cartels is the main reason why these people are fleeing. If all drugs are legal, the cartels lose their power overnight. So that's something to think about there. Increase restrictions on its current border security policy. Yeah, absolutely, I think they should. Allow border states to manage their own. No, because California is going to do some shady shit with that. Yeah, overall, yes, I think that's, yes, they have to. Dual citizenship. Yes. I don't necessarily think if you're a dual citizen of the United States and Ireland that you're like a traitor and that something needs to happen, like, of more than two. I don't see what's the fundamental difference between dual citizenship and tri-citizenship. I don't see how that's really a problem. Like, how that's any worse. We should not allow any new immigrants to this country at this time. I don't know about that either. Like, immigrants is not the problem. It's the way that they're just all coming in and overwhelming the system. We can't, like, continue to... It's not sustainable. Even, like, a sizable number of Democrats now are saying that, so it's not, like, a fringe position to have. So, yeah, I mean, I don't give a shit, though, to be honest, about that question. Pass the citizenship test to a basic... Here's the thing about that, though. Most of our own people would not be able to pass that same test, if we're going to be completely honest. So I don't necessarily believe in literacy tests, and citizenship tests cover very basic and simple who can... Again, if you ask your average fucking person, never mind immigrants coming in, about the founding fathers, about the Constitution, about any of that shit, they don't have a fucking clue. So just for that reason alone, yeah, exactly. Most citizens couldn't even pass a fucking citizenship test. There you go. I didn't even see that, and I was going on there. I should have just said that and be done with it, right? High-risk countries be banned from entering the country until the government improves its ability to screen out potential terrorists. I think, look, the government has the right to do what they want when it comes to immigration. I don't think it's inherently racist. The most populous Muslim countries were never part of the quote-unquote Muslim ban. Pakistan, India, Indonesia have the largest populations of Muslim Americans. Saudi Arabia as well. But you can't compare those countries to a place like Iran, to a place like Yemen, to a place like, these certain countries. I think Sudan was another one. They're a completely different level. And it's not based off of necessarily Islam. It's based off of a radical ideology of Islam. But it's not a racist, evil, fascist policy to say that you can't come in from certain countries. I don't agree with that. So yes, they should be banned is my answer. A photo ID, bro. Abso-fucking-lutely. A photo ID. Here's the thing. You need an ID to literally do anything in life. To open up a credit card, to travel, to, just anywhere you go. A police officer could be like, show me your ID, please. You need to produce an ID. So the fact, I'm very suspicious when these people talk about protecting democracy, free and fair elections, etc., 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 yet they're completely fine with people just not having to show an ID to vote because they're what do they say? They're black people that are too poor to afford an ID. That's actually what a lot of these left-wing individuals have said. That's their reasoning. It's common sense. You should need a photo ID to fucking vote. And you should also vote in person. If you care so much about the election, make the effort to fucking show up. Anyway, that's probably going to be a question. That's definitely going to be another question that's going to come up. So you already know the answer to that one. Should foreigners have the right to vote? If they're citizens, they should have the right to vote. Yes, but they should not be allowed to vote in local elections? What? So, what kind of answer is that? Yes, but they should not be allowed to vote. So you can vote for president, but now you should be able to vote for mayor. What? What? Only be allowed to vote in local elections. So yeah, New York City has that, I think, not for mayor, but for certain elections where illegal immigrants can vote. That's the only answer that needs to be said. Only legal citizens. If you're a citizen, technically you could be considered a foreigner, but it shouldn't be about how many years you lived in the country. It shouldn't be about who pays taxes. It shouldn't be about... No, it should be, are you a citizen? The answer is yes, then you should vote. Citizenship is an institution that should have its benefits, something that people should want to strive for, and not just, no, you shouldn't just give out benefits like that citizens have to everybody, everywhere. It's absurd. Should the Electoral College be abolished? This is another thing I want to see, what the outcome is. The vast majority of people say no. And you know what? I agree with the no. The Electoral College ensures representation of the whole country instead of just major cities. But it's not just about major cities. The Electoral College is what our country was founded on. And I don't think that getting rid of it like... The balance of power within the states is a very important thing. And no, we are not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic. And yes, that's kind of a meme that a lot of people say, but it's an actual thing that, yeah, I think the Electoral College should be kept. Absolutely. And I would say it's a more important thing. If it got completely abolished, it would be interesting, though, because then the candidates would be forced to actually campaign in more places than just the swing states. So I understand the potential benefit of getting rid of it, but it's been such a part of our system since the very beginning. I'm not necessarily a fan of just abolishing it and getting rid of it. Again, these people have ulterior motivations. It's because Trump won via the Electoral College. It's because George W. Bush won via the Electoral College. If there was a situation, and don't completely discount this possibility either, if this election, Joe Biden wins, but Donald Trump wins the popular vote, all this talk about abolishing the Electoral College is going to end instantly. Instantly. Guaranteed. Should political candidates be required to release their recent tax returns? Yes, also medical records. Why do they need their medical records? That's a little bit too much. Yeah, I like that. The audit and all that shit. Fuck yeah. Yeah. Minimum voting age be lowered. I think the minimum voting age should be raised. It should absolutely be raised. And here's the reason why I say that. From my experience in life, and yes, there are a lot of people, like you have 16-year-olds that are like so mature and advanced for their age, you know, because they live in rough situations, and they just grow up faster than a lot of other people. Life experience is what really makes you grow up more than your actual age. There are 30-year-olds that, you know, have never paid a bill on their own. They've never held a job. I mean, they exist. So do those people have more say than a 16-year-old? Like, should they have more say? So I understand age is kind of like an arbitrary concept, you know, why a lot of people believe that the minimum voting age should be lowered to 16. I think it should be raised. I think one of two things should be happen. Raise the voting age to 21 or lower the drinking age to 18. I think a lot of people would probably agree with the drinking age to 18 thing. I think raising the voting age to 21, though, no, again, I don't believe in tests. I think it's just, you know, because the government controls the test and they can decide based off of your answers that you can't vote. So I don't like the whole literacy test and fucking bullshit with that. But in general, I think it should be raised. But I understand both sides, so I'm kind of like a little bit in the middle, but I definitely lean towards no. Definitely not lowering it. That's absurd. And they only do that because the young people tend to vote Democrat, so that's why it's all Democrats that want that to happen. Should there be a limit to the amount of money a candidate can receive? Oh yeah, and going back to that, the vast majority of 16-year-olds don't have political opinions. They don't formulate these opinions on their own. Same with the vast majority of 18-year-olds. Like, it's based off what their family thinks, it's based off what their friends think, but it's not an actual, like, yeah, no. There's no, like, no. 16, no. A limit to the amount of money a candidate can receive from a donor. As long as all donations are public, like, that's the thing. This kind of goes back to the issue of the term limits. We're taking the fundamental responsibility away from the actual voter. Like, the voter should be the one responsible in electing people. And they should have the knowledge that, yeah, they're putting all this money in, but, like, honestly, if your average person is dumb enough to buy into these fucking ads, to buy into, like, you know, whatever the money goes into for these campaigns, if they're like, if it's enough, if money alone is enough to convince people, I like this candidate more than the other one, and I'm going to vote for this candidate because, you know, I just see so many more commercials about them, then if they're that fucking stupid, if the general voting populace is that fucking stupid, then we deserve whatever's going to happen to us. And these regulations and crackdowns and all this stuff isn't really going to do anything to solve the issue of having a very uninformed and stupid voting populace. Should a politician who's been formally convicted of a crime be allowed to run for office? Yeah. As long as they finish serving their sentence, I don't see anything wrong with that. As long as the crime was, I don't care about the crime being committed in office. Felony, I don't care. Again, if you're willing to vote for a fucking pedophile, then vote for the pedophile. Like that's my thing. Like, it's gonna be a deterrent on its own if you feel like this person, and also a felon. Trump can be a felon in months. So there is, like, you know, there's political ramifications for that, to just politicize, you know, to get rid of politicians you don't like. If such a law is enacted where a politician convicted of a crime is barred from running for office, a hell of a lot more politicians are going to be convicted, that's for sure. Should every voter automatically receive? Absolutely fucking not. It's lazy. It has some potential for there being some things going on. Stricter requirements. Abso-fucking-lutely. And I question people who support that. Like, I genuinely do. I question their real motives there. Should corporations, unions, and nonprofit organizations be allowed to donate to political parties? Yeah. Because, again, I think, you know, people talk about the corrupt unions and the corrupt corporations that donate to these certain political movements and political parties. But at the end of the day, if the voters are that fucking dumb to be swayed by these groups, then again, we get what we deserve. So that's that. A 5-year ban on becoming lobbyists? What is that gonna fucking do? Really, what is that gonna do? Like, is that really gonna change anything? Like, I'm skeptical about that. I want to see what people think. Most people say yes. I mean, it seems like a... I mean, I guess it could do something, but I'm just kind of, like, very skeptical. But I'm just going to say that, just... Yeah. Should foreign lobbyists be allowed to raise money for American elections? I'm going to have to agree with the 89% here. Because, again, keep things domestic. I certainly agree with that. Oh, my God. Politicians over the age of 75 pass a mental competency test. We decided that we want Donald Trump and Joe Biden as our two candidates. So I don't know if that's discrimination necessarily. Our government needs experienced leaders. I mean, I don't know if that necessarily is true either. Mental competency is too subjective in the testing. Yeah, I think I honestly agree more with that. I mean, imagine the system says Trump is incompetent, but Biden is not. I mean, is there any actually anyone that thinks that Biden is mentally sharper than Donald Trump at this point? You'd be fooling yourself if you did. And we got questions for criminal issues. Should funding for local police departments be redirected to social and community-based programs? No. I think we should increase funding and training for police departments in higher crime rate communities. The whole defunding the police thing worked so terribly that in pretty much all the places that implemented something like that, they went right back to having a police force or refunding the police pretty quickly because they realized they done fucked up. So the system, like even a lot of diehard liberals will admit that this is just like a fucking crazy idea, and it's just based off of, we hate the police, and we're going to run on that, and it's insane. It really is, because you need a police force in order to have a functioning and civil society, or else it's anarchy, and we can't have that. Should police departments be allowed to use military-grade equipment? I say yeah, but only in response to extreme situations, kind of like the SWAT team thing. I understand in certain cases where that should be a thing, and they should have access to that kind of weaponry. And the only alternative is that, I guess, higher agencies like the FBI would have it instead, but I don't see how that would really mitigate anything if you're worried about police corruption. It's just the federal government would be doing it instead. Yes, there are cases where you need, that type of weaponry in these situations. But I will say it's a little bit of a more important thing to me, because I think, we should not blindly support the police, but just the idea that they shouldn't have these weapons. I mean, the fact that I think citizens should have those weapons, so why would I think the police should not be allowed when their whole job is to protect people? So no, that wouldn't make any sense. Do you support qualified immunity for police officers? So that's the thing. The idea that police officers are essentially above the law, that if, let's say they're involved in a shooting or something happens, that they can be shielded from prosecution in certain cases. I obviously don't believe that should be a thing universally, but I do respect the idea of it, because police officers are in a situation that your average civilian cannot relate to. They're always put in most police officers never actually discharge their weapon, but they're still, a lot of the time, they're in dangerous situations, and a lot of the time they have to act in fight or flight mode. And, certain cases where it's obvious that the police didn't really do anything, or they didn't like take enough precautions to make sure that they were in, like, that the person they shot, like, that was justified. I remember, like, a guy that answered the door, I think it was a kid, he answered the door with a Wii remote, and this fucking female officer shot him dead because she thought the Wii remote was a gun. Like, come on. Like, certain cases. So it should be a case-by-case basis. As far as having a clean record, I mean, I don't really think that really should have an effect, because there are officers that could have a completely clean record, but they can have a career of, you know, abusing their power and shit. So I would say yes, generally I support the idea of it, but I can completely understand and respect why people are against it and why there are people who are concerned. Do I support limiting police unions' collective bargaining power for cases involving misconduct? Abolish police unions? I guess if you're well, aren't police unions like the only right wing, like they lean Republican because they're more friendly, obviously, towards the police. So Democrats, they're in a little bit of a pickle when it comes to police unions, because, you know, I'm gonna say no, because for cases involving misconduct, it would be good if they can band together. And, you know, I do support the idea. Like I said, I do support the idea of unions. They have kind of, you know, gone a little bit too crazy in a lot of cases, and you know, they become pretty much an arm of the Democratic Party. And they, you know, like I did support when the Supreme Court said that if you're not in a union, you don't have to pay union dues. So, I mean, that's my position on as far as the collective bargaining for police. Should convicted criminals have the right to vote? Yeah. Every citizen, I don't care. Every citizen should vote. I don't give a shit. Oh, because you're a criminal, you're no longer like, you're either a fucking citizen or you're not. If you are released from prison, then society has deemed, you know, at least on paper, they have deemed that you are now, quote unquote, rehabilitated, and you are, you know, allowed back into society. And part of that should be, yeah, you should be allowed to vote. I don't give a shit if you're a fucking convicted murderer or whatever. Like, if you're out, you're out. Now, as far as people being allowed to vote in prison, that is more of a thing where I can be like, okay, yeah, if you're in prison, maybe then, you know, because your rights are taken. Like, you know, we do as a society agree, you know, the whole concept of prison is that you have done something so egregious that you no longer belong to, you know, you can no longer be a part of society and engage with society. So if you can't, like, freely move around and do all this shit, then voting, yeah, that should be a consequence if you're in prison. But once you're out, yeah, you should be allowed to vote. Absolutely. Should nonviolent prisoners be released for jail in order to reduce overcrowd? What are we talking about when we say nonviolent, though? Are we talking about, like, someone selling meth? Are we talking about someone committing, like, stealing money from people? Because that's not violent. You know, people in Wall Street, or even if you're just, like, like, even if you, like, just steal, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of shit, like, if you're a burglar, you know, if you rob a bank and you don't fire a single shot, you're nonviolent, right? That's a nonviolent crime. If you just say, hey, give me the money. Well, I guess if you're holding someone at gunpoint, that's considered violent, even if you're not actually doing it, like, actually hurting people. So never mind. I don't forget that. But yeah, it's a little bit too of a broad thing, because you could be a non-violent person and still be, like, have committed such an egregious thing that you maybe should, you know, be punished. So no, we should build more prisons. Fuck no to that. Increase funding to offer education and skill building services for prisoners. I actually do like something like that, because a lot of the time what happens is people get out of prison, right? And they're right back at, like, a lot of them are right back to their criminal tendencies, because, you know, the question that they ask on a job interview, are you a convicted felon? You know, And it's really hard to get back into society after you're gone for, like, you know, never mind 10, 20 years, but even 1 year. That being on your record, it fucks you for life. So, you know, it's an issue that's not really talked about a lot, but it is a big issue with the way that, you know, ex-prisoners are treated by society after they're already out. I would support something like that, yeah. Mandatory minimum. For drug possession? Fuck no. Absolutely fucking not. Mandatory minimum for drug possession. Huh. Prisons ban the use of solitary confinement for juveniles. Yeah. I mean, it's like, especially with juveniles. I think, you know, the whole point of juvie being a separate thing is that it should take into account the age of the offender. Um, I mean, I think, yeah, it is severely psychologically damaging to young, undeveloped minds. That's something that I would certainly agree with. Should police officers... Yeah, fuck yeah, police officers should be required to wear body cameras. Yes, but only for patrol high crime? No, they should always have fucking body cameras so that whatever they do, like, you can tell. I remember that fucking video that somehow got on the body camera of a fucking officer, like, fucking, like, clear as day, planting drugs into the dude's fucking yard and shit. Like, come on. So, like, body cameras are an important thing. It's not necessarily, like, you know, a thing against the police. Like, I don't understand. If you're a police officer that's doing the right thing, why do you care so much about this? Why do you feel like you can't wear a body camera, or that it's like a violation of your what? Your privacy? You are a public servant. You are not a private servant. So I don't want to fucking hear that shit. So, yes, protect the safety and rights. Yeah, and hey, if it's a justified shoot or whatever, then you have the fucking footage to prove it. So yes, it is not just good for the citizens for transparency and accountability, but it's also good for the police officers if the IAB or whoever is you know, looking into them and they're being accused of misconduct. So yes, body cameras all the way. Should the government hire private companies to run prisons? Fuck no. Private prisons are such a horrible thing. It profit incentivizes incarcerating people, so no. And should drug traffickers receive the death penalty? Absolutely fucking not. No, sentence them to life in prison without parole. No, I don't believe that. I also, yes, I am against, you know, generally against the idea of the death penalty, so, I mean, that's part of it, but it's really just... I don't believe that drug traffickers should receive much penalty. Like, it's a supply and demand problem. You're going after the supply, so, you know, you're addressing that, or you're trying to, but it's like you cut off one head, 3 more take its place. The whole war on drugs has been, like, arguably the most failed public policy over the past century. And prohibition is really an extension, is a good example of that as well. You know, so when people say, oh, we need to ban this, we need to ban that, like, okay, but we've tried that before, and it's failed miserably. So banning all these things don't really solve anything. So that's why, yeah, if you're a drug trafficker, like, you're not really addressing, like you're not really the underlying cause of the problem. You're just a symptom of the problem. People aren't going to suddenly not want to do meth if they're trying to arrest every drug trafficker in the country. Like, it just doesn't work. I think if they legalize drugs tomorrow in the United States, Mexico, Central America, the whole thing with the drug cartels, all the violence going on, it would be fucking gone in an instant. And I'm pretty sure I said that earlier, but it's hard to know because it's been so... this has been going on for so long. Only if there's proof someone died from the drugs. Give me a break. No. I'm just going to say no, and that's going to be, like, a most important thing. Yeah, fuck. Foreign policy, should the government increase or decrease military spending? I would say the amount of spending should be decreased because we are, like, our spending, it goes, again, into the whole thing of government being incompetent when it comes to allocating funds and that kind of stuff. We had, the fighter jet they spent trillions of dollars on that'll never see combat because it has significant design flaws, like shit like that. So like the amount is like, okay, you can double the military budget, and it's not going to make us safer. You know what I mean? It's just not going to happen. So I do not like the idea of like, you know, every fucking budget cycle, it seems like every time the budget comes up, automatically, like it's a bipartisan thing. Democrats and Republicans are like, yes, we're increasing the budget, no questions asked. That's like the one thing. It's funny, the very few things we do get bipartisan consensus on, like it's shitty things that we shouldn't have, that we shouldn't get. So I'm gonna say decrease, and I think that is a more important thing because there's like all this fucking shit that would be better spent on the American people, and I feel like the military budget could be half of what it is, and we're not gonna be we're not gonna be less safe as a result of that. You know, like China has like maybe a tenth of the military budget that we have, yet are we making plans to invade China because, yes, militarily, could we probably defeat them? Sure. But does that necessarily mean that war is, like, a desirable outcome? Like, Russia doesn't want to attack America. China doesn't want to attack America because the one thing we do have that makes sure that that doesn't happen is nuclear weapons. Our nuclear warheads, it's, you know, the whole concept of mutually assured destruction. Well, that would happen, you know, if war was to happen. So that's why I don't feel like just increasing the military is going to increase safety and security. Like, I think those measures are pretty much already in place. Like, during that whole Cold War was the most tense that things have ever been, you know, but it never actually led to a full-blown war because of the concept of mutually assured destruction. So I think that's, you know, what's protecting us more than anything. Should the U.S. remain in the United Nations? I think, yeah. We should remain in the United Nations. I don't necessarily think that the United Nations is a very useful tool. I don't think the UN is like the thing that's, you know, prevented the World War III from happening. I don't necessarily buy that. The UN just doesn't seem like a very effective... I mean, because they're not a world government. They don't have actual legislative power or military power, mind you. Like, they can't do anything. They can't enforce any of these resolutions. They can't do anything, really, and that, you know, that's probably for the best because a world police force that, you know, just tries to decide on behalf of everybody what's for the best... not the best, not a good idea. It would definitely lead to a lot of problems. So, yeah, I'm just gonna say remain, but I'm not really a big UN person. But just leaving wouldn't really be in our best interest either. Should foreign terrorism suspects be given constitutional rights? You know, the funny thing is, when I first read this question, because I remember this question, I answered it years and years ago, like in 2015, 2016, during that election cycle, and I just like laughed at how ridiculous that question sounded. Of course, terrorists shouldn't have constitutional rights. But the thing is, we should treat people like, you know, we are acting as the United States of America, and we are detaining these people. Yes, they should be given rights. They should have rights. You know, they shouldn't just be like, oh yeah, we can fucking waterboard you. We can just do whatever the fuck we want. We can torture you, kill you, and no one will fucking know, and we can just do what we want. Like, I have a serious problem with that. Just because we're overseas doesn't mean we have free reign to do whatever the fuck we want. And most of these fucking conflicts, if not all these conflicts that we've been in over the past, like, 40 or so years, we had no fucking business being there anyway. So I'm going to say, yeah, just like the U.S., terrorists should be given a fair trial at federal courts. And terrorists, I'm going to use that in air quotes, because not everyone who they fucking detained was actually a terrorist. The idea that, oh, they're not citizens, do not have constitutional rights. Well, if they're not U.S. citizens, then they should not be fucking detained by the U.S. then, by using that stupid fucking logic. So yeah, I don't like that one. That's a dumbass fucking thing. Yeah, no. Should the U.S. increase or decrease foreign aid spending? I'm gonna say we have a serious problem in America. I think we should really focus on our own shit before we like, oh yeah, we'll give money to here, we'll give money to there. Like, our priorities are obviously not straight here. Should the U.S. provide military supplies and funding to the Ukraine? So, this is going to be an unpopular thing. I am not, like, all crazy about this whole Ukraine thing. I am not on the fucking Russian side either. But I think that what we're doing isn't really accomplishing any. I mean, I guess it is in the sense that it's prolonging the war. And it means, because I think if it weren't for our involvement and Western Europe's involvement with all the aid and everything, Ukraine probably would have already fallen to Russia. So I rely on their own resources and defend themselves. I do. You see, I don't. It kind of contradicts it because I just said I was against foreign aid. But in senses where, like, it's a clear thing that we're like, yeah, it's not a Vietnam situation. I'll just put it that way. Where, like, there really is no objective good guy or objective bad guy. Like, Russia and Ukraine, I mean, it's not the same thing. I think Ukraine is definitely more on the side of, like, they're defending their right to exist against Russia. So I don't know if increasing or decreasing is necessarily going to be a good thing. I generally do support, though, the funding of the Ukraine, but I'm not like, as someone who lives in the United States, I'm gonna admit, selfishly, I don't really lose sleep at night over the whole Russia-Ukraine situation. I just don't. It's not something that I think about very often. It's like that most people don't really think about. You hear all the time about Israel and Palestine now. That's the thing. You hear nothing anymore about Russia and Ukraine. So, yeah, I guess I'm somewhere in the middle on the whole thing. But generally, I do support the idea of, some military support to other countries. Should the military fly drones over foreign countries to gain intelligence and kill suspected terrorists? So I would say, like, again, like, we shouldn't just have free reign to do whatever the fuck we want, especially in sovereign territory. But if we're talking about sovereign territory, it depends on what we mean when we say that. Do we mean, like, actual legitimate countries, or do we mean, like, fucking, terrorist-held strongholds? Like, I mean, obviously, like, we're talking about the state, but I feel like it's a bit of a murky thing, because, how many times do they use the fucking drones and they blow up civilians that had nothing to do with fucking terrorism? Just get the fuck out of the Middle East. That's my whole thing. Get the fuck out of there. So, yeah, I mean, gathering intelligence, I guess, is fine. I mean, really, every country has fucking spies. Having surveillance and espionage and that kind of thing, I'm not necessarily against, right? But as far as, like, just blowing people up without, like, authorization, like, and a lot of the time you don't even get the right people. Remember when Obama bombed the fucking Doctors Without Borders? Yeah, that was good. Should the U.S. continue to support Israel? I want to see the stats with this, because I'm very curious what people are fucking... Ooh, yeah, a lot of mixed opinion here. 68% yes, 32% no. Okay. I think Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. They, like, objectively speaking, even if you are an Arab, you are going to live a better life in Israel than almost all these other countries in the region. So, in order to move our embassy to Jerusalem, didn't we already fucking... Oh, we didn't do it yet, but we like, declared Jerusalem the capital, right? I'm pretty sure. Trump did. Respect Israel's sovereignty, and don't dictate how it should interact. Well, if we're funding all their fucking shit, I don't necessarily agree with that. Cutting all support and aid is wild. The fact that there are some people who believe that and think that the world's going to be a better place if Israel's wiped off the fucking map, because that's exactly what would happen. We should be less involved. I don't necessarily think that. I think we have a good opportunity. Again, since we're supporting all this shit with Israel, like, that we can have, like, influence in the Middle East, but not the kind of influence where we're just fucking, killing all these people. Like Iraq, like, yeah, we're just gonna invade you guys. I think, supporting them in the sense that they have the right to defend themselves, I do support. Oh, not the current administration. Oh, yeah, I hate Netanyahu, but, the next guy is going to be perfect, so we'll support him instead. No, I think I generally support Israel existing as a country. A lot of these choices don't necessarily represent exactly how I think about the whole thing. But Israel is a country that should exist. It's there. It's a country. And realistically, without our support, it would be gone. And it would be catastrophic. So that's why I support Israel. We're not talking, like, the whole comparison, oh, Israel is just like modern day fucking South Africa, is absurd. Completely absurd. And there's no comparison to be made, because you have Arabs that serve in government. You have Arabs that have full citizenship rights in Israel. So I don't want to hear that shit. I really don't. Should the U.S. remain in NATO? I do. Yeah, U.S. should remain in NATO. It's obsolete and should be abolished. Well, that was a common fucking saying that people, probably like around 2015-ish to probably like up until the Ukraine war. So it's been proven in just a few short years, maybe NATO isn't so obsolete. That was one thing Trump said that, maybe wasn't a good thing. I mean, I know there are going to be some fucking people saying, well, NATO's actually the reason why Russia invaded Ukraine. Yeah. If that was their goal, was to undermine NATO, that fucking failed miserably, because we have more NATO members now, fucking Finland, and like more countries trying to get in on it now. So I don't think that was a strategy. I think just Russia just wants the fucking Ukraine. He doesn't fucking give a shit. Putin wants the Ukraine, doesn't give a fucking shit. So I'm gonna say, yeah, I mean, the countries should all definitely increase their financial contributions, and that's one thing Trump did do. Like, that was good. It was, really putting pressure on countries like Germany to increase their share, and to, because it's unfair for the U.S. to put, like, whatever percentage of their budget, of their military budget, into NATO. Like, let's say it's like 5% or whatever it was, and then these other countries doing 1%, 2%, So I do understand a lot of the criticism against the shit, but overall, yeah, NATO's a very important thing. Should the military... Oh, speaking of waterboarding, should it be allowed to use waterboarding to gain information from suspected terrorists? Yes, but only as a last resort. No, fuck that. Fucking waterboarding is it's cruel, and it's like, it's at the point, like, that kind of stuff, like, they're gonna say whatever the fuck to get you to stop. Like, torture is not really, it violates the Eighth Amendment also, but just the fact that it is ineffective. Support Obama's move to lift the trade and travel. Yeah, I actually do. I was fucking pissed when that was reversed by Trump. Dude, Cuba ain't fucking... Dude, it's been like 80 fucking years at this point, or 70 years. Like, come on. Should every 18-year-old citizen be required to provide at least 1 year of military service? No. Absolutely fucking not. Like, really? No. That I do not support that. Not one bit. Nope. Should the U.S. defend other NATO countries that maintain low Oh, speaking of that, I just mentioned that. So I do think it does set a precedent a dangerous one. I think we should pressure them, though. Oh, yeah, 2% of their GDP. That's what it is, 2%. That was the big thing. It's a tough situation. But realistically, if you're gonna like force these countries out of NATO, I mean, really, like if they just pay their fucking share, they could stay. Like that sounds like a good thing, but in practice, it's probably gonna end up being a lot messy than it would actually do in solving that problem of certain countries not contributing their fair share. I mean, it's more important to have them as allies, even if, like, you know, maybe they're not paying as much as you'd want them to. I think it's definitely a lot better to have them as part of NATO. Should the U.S. continue NSA surveillance of its allies? The NSA I don't like the NSA. I really don't. I mean, I said that Edward Snowden should be fucking free, so that's everything you need to know about what I think about the NSA. I do think spying on our allies damages our reputation, but again, realistically, everyone's fucking spying on everybody. I'm sure our allies are spying on us in whatever way that they can. So, I mean, again, espionage and that kind of thing, I'm not necessarily against. When it comes to our own people, though, you know, I don't really like that very much with a lot of this invasive shit that they tried to pull, you know, with like, fucking Patriot Act and all that kind of crap. NSA surveillance, I mean, realistically, are we going to Britain and listening to all their phone calls? You know? So, I don't know, actually. Which would be the better choice? I'm just saying, generally, it's better if they're your allies to not spy on them. At least, like, you know, have some kind of understanding or agreement. If they're your ally, you know, if they're your adversary, that's a different situation. You know, if they're like a country that you're not really in good terms with. Should the Ukraine join NATO? Yeah, I think this is something that it's going to cause more harm than good. Ukraine being a part of NATO would be like, okay, we're going to attack. Like, Russia's not going to be like, the U.S. and all these countries have decided that Ukraine is now a part of NATO, which means that, you know, if this war continues, if Russia keeps attacking, then then the U.S. is going to war with Russia. They're not going to fucking back down over stuff like, you know, even if they were like full speed, we're going to make it happen. There is no chance in hell that would be a good outcome for the world. It absolutely wouldn't. So I would say no. It's something that, again, there are a lot of things in the world and, you know, policy-wise, sounds great, but, you know, in practice, it's a fucking disaster. So, no. Which side of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict do I side with more? Humanitarian wise, I support both equally, but if we're talking government and like the people in charge, like Hamas, because the thing is, yeah, like, it's funny, it's called the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That's what people talk about. They say Israel and Palestine, not realizing that the people in charge of Palestine, or not necessarily the entire Palestine, you have the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, but in Gaza you have Hamas, and they're fucking subhuman. Like, no, like, you cannot compare the Israeli government to Hamas terrorists. You just can't. So I'm gonna say slightly, there is a preference to Israel, but only in the context of, you know, here we have an actual democracy where people have rights and freedoms versus a fucking savages. That's really what they are, that run the Gaza Strip. And what they did was barbaric, killing all those people on October 7th. And has there been some fucked up things that Israel's done? Yes, but if I have to, like, you put a gun to my head, tell me which side do I have to support, it's going to be Israel overall. Sorry. Oh yeah, the F-35. That was the fucking jet that I think I don't think this is. It's not relevant. I'm actually gonna say that it's not relevant and should be removed because who the fuck's gonna vote based on the fucking Biden or Trump's position on the F-35? Like, is that still a thing? Is that still a thing? And also, I guess, like, do we cancel it and shit away all that money, or do we fucking waste even more money trying to actually make it functional and usable by the military? So either way, it just fucking sucks. So the real thing should be like, either way, this shit sucks. Like, that would be my answer, as opposed to a yes or a no. Should Jerusalem be recognized as the capital of Israel? I mean, it de facto is the capital of Israel, and pretending that it's not isn't going to change the fact that it is. So I don't care about the semantics. I don't care about optics and all that kind of shit. It's functionally the capital. It's where their government is. It's where everything's happening. So yeah, I mean, it's what it is. But I'm gonna admit it's not something I really care about as much. Should the U.S. sell military weapons to India in order to counter Chinese and Russian influence? I don't mind the whole idea. Again, like, I really don't mind the idea of selling weapons. I mean, hey, we have all this fucking shit that we've spent all this taxpayer money on. We might as well get some some kind of compensation / reimbursement for that, and also benefit a lot of these countries, that we're trying to ally with. I mean, again, you can't say we want to give weapons to the Ukraine and like, people like to cherry pick which countries they want weapons given to. And some people may not like India or the Indian government, but they could be a very useful, like, just for the, like, overall stability and for the interest of the United States, to have stuff like that in place and to try to ally more with these countries, like in India, that is kind of, not necessarily under the U.S. sphere of influence, but is also not under Russian or Chinese. I mean, China and India are, have been quite adversarial to each other, but, we haven't been, like, the best of friends with India either, so I think, yeah, it would be a good opportunity to do something like that. Yeah, it will boost the economy, too. The whole, concern about the U.S. being arms dealers, but it's just the whole fact that, like, I mean, these weapons are there and it is what it is, kind of thing. That's my mentality. But I'll admit it's not really, a huge thing that I think about. National security. Should the president be able to authorize military force against Al-Qaeda without congressional approval? I think Congress should approve all military conflicts. I mean, generally speaking, that there's a reason why that's in place in the Constitution, because it's a smart thing, instead of the president just being able to do the fuck he wants and then going too far and then fucking us all over. I know commander-in-chief, but that needs to have its limits. You can't, like, one person shouldn't have unlimited control over the military and, taking military action. Should the U.S. assassinate suspected terrorists in foreign countries? Undeniable evidence. What does the U.S. consider undeniable? I mean, fucking, what was his name? Colin Powell seemed to indicate that his evidence was undeniable, that they had WMDs in Iraq. So I don't necessarily, the term undeniable doesn't really do anything for me. Captured and given a fair trial. I like that. Capture, interrogate, and imprison them. Okay, but that doesn't sound like you're really giving them, because we, suspected, has every single suspected terrorist that we've killed actually been one, right? So generally, like, I think the U.S., like, the military should have, yeah, I mean, I think, generally speaking, I do, like, if there is, it's truly that they did it, that we should, be able to do stuff like that. I just don't have much faith or trust in the U.S. government, so that's my problem. And then should the government fucking, uh, should the U.S. military fight the Mexican drug cartels? That would not legalize all drugs instead. That's just that's the choice. That's the only choice here. Education. Do you support increasing taxes for the rich in order to reduce interest rates for student loans? Look, I understand the student loan crisis, and it's a serious issue, and there is like sympathy to be had for these people. A lot of people fooled, and the fact that the federally insured loans for fucking 18-year-olds, they couldn't get a loan for anything else, like especially $100,000, $200,000. There's nothing else in life that they would fucking loan out money, at least that much money, to an 18-year-old with no work experience or nothing. So the federal government does have a lot of responsibility for that. As far as increasing taxes for the rich in order to bail these people out, I just don't agree with that. I really don't. So, no. I'm just going to say no, because the other choices don't really appeal to me either. I'd be pissed if I was rich and fucking they were increasing my taxes because people were in all this debt. Like, you do have a part to play in that responsibility as an individual. You shouldn't have to rely on other people, especially like, oh yeah, the government, or we're going to increase taxes just to be able to pay for the student. Like, bro, they misallocate funds so much. Why would you trust that if they increase the taxes, it's actually going to be used for that anyway, even if you do like the idea of it? But because most people are broke and don't have money, it's irrelevant, Should the federal government pay for tuition at four-year colleges and universities? College degree isn't really like it's like if everyone like we're already at the point where the market demand is a lot lower than the actual supply in terms of how many people have college degrees. So if you just make it free for everyone, everyone's going to go to college, and the degree is going to be even more worthless, and it's going to be even a bigger waste of money in the United States. So I'm going to say no. I like the idea of scholarships, but because that is kind of more merit based, and it's people who actually like are serious about school and shit like that, and they're probably more likely, honestly, to be successful. But I'm just gonna say overall, I don't like the idea of free universal college. Critical race theory. Should critical race theory be taught in K-12 education? So this has been like a whole topic for years now. Isn't it the 1619 project is pretty much like, oh yeah, we like it because 1619, I believe, is a reference to the first year that slaves were transported to North America. That could be incorrect. Like, I'm going to admit I'm not fully researched into this whole debate. The whole thing, a lot of it seems manufactured. I think, are there school districts that take it a little bit too far, but is this like this widespread nationwide thing where they're indoctrinating you to hate white people and to say that our country, like, oh yeah, like our country is founded, like, is inherently evil and racist, and I mean, like, look, that might be a little bit of like, you're undermining a lot of the other aspects of the country, like of the founding, of rising against tyranny and that sort of thing, but you should acknowledge the fact that despite all of that, the Constitution and all these really good things, there were millions of people who were tortured, abused, and did not have freedom. They were not entitled to those same rights. So I am kind of more of like, okay, yeah, I mean, you don't have to say like to fucking 6 or 7 year olds. Like, I think once, students reach a certain age, you should be able to at least discuss it, and not even like, like just have it like an open-ended discussion, pretty much. We cannot end racism until we acknowledge that our institutions, laws, and history are inherently racist. I mean, That looks like straight from a Tumblr post, so I'm not going to agree with that necessarily. Kids should be raised to be racially colorblind, but again, we're talking about like history, and history does have like the history of the United States has a lot of dark parts of it, including its origins. So I'm gonna say, yeah, wait until they're a little older so they have a better, understanding and all that kind of stuff. Having like trying to teach this shit to a 5-year-old while he's sucking on apple juice doesn't really accomplish anything. But universal pre-K. So, I mean, I went to pre-K, so I understand the benefits of it, and I think, yeah, overall, preschool is a good thing. I remember like being in kindergarten and the other kids like being at a significant disadvantage, like a lot of them not really knowing how to read and all that kind of stuff. Me going to pre-K really helped me, and it helped like all the other kids that I knew that also went to pre-K. So I support pre-K absolutely. As long as they have the option to send their child to I guess like for pre-K, sure. Private pre-K, I don't think that should be outlawed. you know. Do I support charter schools? So, I mean, the whole debate around school choice, charter schools, I think they certainly have their place. As far as like banning all charter schools and replacing it all with, like being completely publicly ran, I don't think is going to necessarily create the, is going to lead to the benefits that a lot of people believe that it will, because I'm pretty sure like most people on the left wing side of things would be like, yeah, no charter schools. But I'm going to say, I mean, education should not be privatized. That's like a great idea. But again, it's like we have the public school system. I don't necessarily think that, getting rid of all charter schools and not funding these private schools anymore and, having all those dollars go towards public schools is necessarily going to magically create a good public school system. It again goes back to the whole thing issue I've been talking about like this entire time, is that do we trust, whether we're talking about local governments, state governments, or federal governments, to properly allocate these funds? Like, it doesn't matter what, like at a certain point, whatever you do with this money, it doesn't solve the inherent problem of government being incompetent as fuck. You know what I mean? So having like a hybrid public-private thing, I actually do support stuff like that. An entire education system should be privatized. Whoever thinks that is a fucking clown. But generally, I do support that. The charter school system, sure. Common Core national standards. I support the concept, but not the current implementation. Yes, I mean, the idea that you're like in bumfuck Iowa and you live in New York City, that you should have the same quality education, the same standards of education, I think is a great idea. In practice, though, implementing that nationwide everywhere is not a realistic endeavor. So, I mean, I think having national, but I do support, like, having national standards, I do think definitely will improve the national average. And, I mean, better prepare students for college. I mean, I think we should focus on better preparing students for life. Because college is not the end-all, be-all like I was taught when I was younger, and, a lot of other people were. It's just kind of, I mean, lost its prestige and value in society, so I don't think college should be the fucking goal here. But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in the middle, though, because I've been I've experienced the Common Core system and have seen its flaws, throughout the years of me being a student. Should the government decriminalize school truancy? So what do you mean by decriminalize? Do we mean, are we throwing the parents in jail? Are we throwing the students in jail? I don't know what exactly decriminalize entails. I'm just gonna say, no. I mean, I support the idea of having, like, a truancy, and cracking down on that kind of stuff, because it does fuck up, like, a lot of parents just, like, fucking neglect their kids and shit like that. So, I don't necessarily oppose that. Should the government offer students a voucher they can use to attend private schools? Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes into the whole charter school thing. I think vouchers are fine, but I mean, here's the problem. Are we talking about, like, offering a voucher? Like, let's say the fucking tuition for this private school is, like, $50,000. Like, you're not... That's, like, you're way overspending for these fucking kids to go to these schools as opposed to, like, just assimilating them or, you know, incorporating them into the public school system. So I think there should be a cap within a reasonable amount, right? I think that sounds like a decent thing. For low-income families, yeah, I would say. That would be ideal. So, again, I'm kind of in the middle with that. And should colleges be held financially accountable if graduates with degrees leading to lower income jobs default on their student loans? Fucking, bro, again, it's like a lot of personal responsibility that's being neglected here. Like, you know, blame... I mean, the college certainly has its role to play in that, but they're just benefiting from a system that the government fucking created, where you have these federally guaranteed loans and it's, you know, having so many people go into college. Like, yeah, you know, I'm kind of against that whole thing, honestly, at this point. But as far as blaming the fucking, like, the colleges be held financially accountable, that's scapegoating, and I don't really like that kind of thing. So I do think, yeah, students' responsibility is one thing, but decreasing the cost of education, I mean, that sounds good too. I'm just going to say the student's responsibility overall. Yeah. And finally, we're at our last set of questions here. We have a couple of questions on housing, and then the economy, and then we can finally get our results here. Housing. Should homeless individuals that have refused available shelter or housing be allowed to sleep or encamp on public property? So, the thing about shelters is that they're fucking, you know, they're not the best places to be, and there's legitimate reasons why homeless people will refuse shelters. At the same time, just letting homeless people sleep wherever they want is not a viable solution. So I'm gonna say make it a criminal offense. That's a bit too much. These are people just trying to survive. But I will say, generally speaking, you can't just... like, we need to invest more in the homeless, absolutely. And, you know, that's why I support stuff like, you know, fucking cutting the military and cutting down on our spending. But, you know, having a better allocation of our funds and actually helping our own people, you know, is something that I think needs to be a priority. And that's part of it is helping out the homeless. It's, you know, it's very, it's a very big problem. Should the government incentivize the construction of high-density residential buildings? So, incentivize how? Are they going to seize people's fucking property through eminent domain? Because if you're talking about that, then I'm not going to necessarily, like, be like, oh yeah, let's just fucking do that. No. It depends. Are these places, like, where housing... I mean, yeah, I mean, housing is a problem, and increasing housing is something I definitely support, but I need to know a little bit more about how they go by doing this in creating more residential buildings in places. So I'm going to say yes, but leave it kind of more open-ended. Economic issues. Should the U.S. raise taxes on the rich? Here's the thing. I like the flat tax. I just do. I think, you know, if we're talking about fair share, well, everyone's paying the fucking same percentage. I think that's how it should work, because you have, you know, it seems like most of the people who advocate for raising taxes on people with higher income are people who have such low income that they barely pay taxes at all. So, I don't think that's fair. Regardless of what your income is, you know, if we should all have to fucking pay one way or the other. So I'm going to say that flat tax is good. I don't, I'm not extreme enough to say abolish the income tax or some of these other choices. Um, should the government raise the federal minimum wage? It's a fucking never-ending cycle. The minimum wage, you raise the minimum wage, and it just fucking makes everything go up, and restaurants raise their prices. We've seen it with places like in California where McDonald's has to make everything way more expensive just in California because, I mean, the money's gotta fucking come from somewhere, right? So I'm gonna say, yeah, it'll be a never-ending fucking cycle. Sounds great, but doesn't actually work in practice. Universal basic income. No, I don't think UBI is an actual thing that will help people. Sorry. Welfare recipients be tested for drugs? No. I think it's just a waste of time and money. Shouldn't be doing that. Should the U.S. raise or lower the tax rate for corporations? Lower, but eliminate deductions and loopholes? That sounds good to me. Labor unions help or hurt? I think they help in theory. They recently have been corrupt. They should have their powers limited in a little bit of ways, so I definitely do support that, but I'm certainly not completely anti-union. They do a lot for the worker and for society as a whole. Should employers be required to pay men and women the same? So the gender wage gap has been debunked. It's not like what they say, oh yeah, 78 cents to $1. That if you actually look into it, it's not as black and white as that. So I'm gonna say, yeah, I mean, I think this is like pretty much a non-issue, to be honest. Cuts to spending in order to reduce the national debt. I mean, generally speaking, yes. Again, it's all about like how do you allocate the money, and we're obviously spending too much though, regardless of what you're like with the debt and everything. It's a ticking time bomb. It gets more and more and more and more and more, and it's got to be stopped. Should the government increase the tax rate on profits earned from the sale of stocks, bonds, and real estate? Well, since I am someone who trades, I have my own fucking thing. I don't necessarily support that, of increasing the tax rates on, capital gains. So I'm going to say abolish capital gains. I don't think abolishing capital gains is something that should be done, but yeah, I mean, I think that's just an ultimate thing is people are going to invest elsewhere where you don't have this problem, global market. So I don't like that whole idea. Should there be fewer or more restrictions on current welfare? So welfare in a lot of ways has gotten out of hand with certain programs. But I think there should be a serious welfare reform because what we have going on right now is not very sustainable. Required paid family leave? I mean, it is a very important thing to have, but I don't know that the business should be forced to, shell out that money. So that's my position on that. Economic stimulus to aid the country, like it's been proven. So FDR did that shit, and it didn't actually prove to be effective. The economy didn't really start to turn around until we went full on World War II, production, all those jobs that were created as a result of making tanks and all that stuff. And also because we were like the only country that wasn't war ravaged, we benefited a lot and were able, like, we pretty much gained a huge foothold in the global economy. So it really wasn't FDR's policies, his economic policies, that really did a whole lot, but rather the advantageous position that we found ourselves in following the aftermath of the Second World War, and also during the war we were producing all the tanks and weapons and stuff for not just ourselves when we were in the war, but for other countries. So we made a lot of money because of that, and the economy was able to turn around as a result. So I'm going to say no. Yeah, I'm going to say that. It's just recessions happen. You can't really necessarily avoid a recession. It's a just part of the process. I don't think that stimulus helps though, so I'm gonna actually say that yeah, they should probably reduce spending during a recession. Should the current estate fuck the death tax? Seriously, fuck the death tax. I don't care. No. I'm gonna say eliminate it. Should the government break up Amazon, Facebook, and Google? I don't think so. No. I think that's a little bit too much. Should the government require businesses to pay salaried employees making up to $46,000 time and a half? Why would it be up to $46,000? I think everybody should fucking have to get paid overtime. $46,000 is too fucking low, especially the with inflation and everything that's going on. I think overtime is overtime, and you should just be compensated for that regardless. Oh yeah, but I understand though because if you're salaried, it's different than hourly, because hourly is really what most of those protections are aimed towards for overtime. But either way, I think yeah, regardless of pay scale, that's what I would say. Should U.S. citizens be allowed to save or invest their money? Yeah, as long as it's reported. I don't see why. I mean, I think people should just be allowed to put their money where they want, within reason. Should the president offer tax breaks to individual companies to keep jobs in the U.S.? Yeah. Drastically increase taxes and import tariffs on outsourcing businesses. I totally supported Trump's push for that. And should we transition to 4-day work week? Look, I love the idea of it, but in it's kind of like the minimum wage. In it sounds great, but is it actually going to work? I doubt it. So here are the results. I've never heard of any of these fucking people, or at least most of them. But apparently Nikki Haley was my favorite candidate, 81%. And then Robert Kennedy Jr., 71%. Donald Trump is 70%. So the idea that, yeah, Robert Kennedy is more of a Democrat than a Republican is definitely not true. I mean, I knew that, but yeah, I mean, looking at that, you could see libertarian, independent, libertarian. Apparently Joe Exotic is running for president. Did not know that. And then all the way down, Democrat, Marianne Williamson, 42%, 41% Cornel West. I like Cornel West, but yeah, politically I don't really have a lot in common with him. And Joe Biden is only 35%. Yeah, I'm voting for Democrat. No, I'm definitely not. There's a Senate race in New York, apparently, that doesn't matter because the Democrat's going to win. So 70% for Trump, 35% for Biden. That's the number that, those are the two that really actually matter. These other guys, I mean, Nikki Haley dropped out. I guess they used to have other Republicans on there. They've dropped out way sooner, though, than Nikki Haley, because she was the final holdout, right? Interesting. What about by party? Can we... Okay. So I'm 71% libertarian. Okay. 71% libertarian, 70% Constitution, 70% Republican, then 65% veteran, 63 patriot. So basically, they think I'm a right winger, which, fine. You want to label me as that? Go ahead. I mean, 70% is still... 30% difference is still a pretty big difference, I'd say. But I guess, a 73% difference with the Democratic Party. I definitely, don't really have much in common with the Democrats. That's for sure. Especially when we talk about, abortion and stuff like that. So they say I'm mostly a classical liberal. Mostly. There's still, a lot of percentage there that's, because I've seen people taking these tests before when it comes to the candidates, when it comes to the ideology and that kind of stuff, and they like get like 95, almost 100% with like whatever candidate. I remember that used to happen all the time.